This is an LA Times Studios podcast.
I don't know what changed that December that the LAPD showed up and they were like, hey, we're doing a welfare check. And Caroline Herrling's there and she's like, meets them on the driveway and she's like, oh, I'm the trustee and here's these documents. And they search the house and they don't find anything. Although I later found out actually that Charles's body was in the garage and he was dead. Like right when LAPD showed up that December, he was already dead.
Hello and welcome to LA Crimes. I'm your host, Madison McGhee. Today, I'm joined by Los Angeles Times reporter Brittny Mejia. Brittny, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to talk with you. Today, we have a pretty freaky case involving wire fraud, missing people, and a fiery redhead scamming people out of millions. Brittny, how would you summarize this case in one sentence, if that's even possible?
That is so hard to boil down. I would say for myself, the craziest case I've ever covered involving just like a master criminal person. Honestly, someone who I'm shocked from what I heard, she was a meth addict. She pulled off a major cons.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'm hooked. I'm ready to dive in. But before we do, you've never been on the show. So I want to hear a little bit more about you. So our first segment with new guests, we like to call the Gateway Case. Mm-hmm. So you've been a reporter for a while and you cover kind of crazy stories. What was the first story that you heard about or remember discovering that really made you want to do this as a career?
That is a great question. I've been at the LA Times now for 11 years, so a while. And I will say, I think early on, the first thing that made me want to be a journalist was Harriet the Spy. So it was watching that movie probably. And then I thought I wanted to be a spy, had binoculars, a tape recorder, would lift people's fingerprints and put it in my notebook. And then my sister's like, you shouldn't be a spy, you should be a journalist. And
wow.
Yeah, so after that, it was a lot of me reading newspaper articles. I don't think I really discovered I wanted to do in-depth crime and feature reporting until I got to the LA Times, to be honest.
Oh, wow. What was the first story you ever covered in that vein?
Yeah, I feel like early on when I started, especially when I was a fellow, so I was straight out of college when I started here at the paper, and I covered – actually, I think one of the biggest deep dives I did was this dad. It was a really sad story. It was this dad who stabbed 3 of his sons to death and tried to kill himself and survived. And it was one where I went to the funeral. I went to the memorial service, literally saw the boys in the caskets. And I was like, whoa. I think that was one where I was like, okay, this is – I was like, it was important to get into what happened and how things went wrong and what the warning signs had been. And I don't know. I think that was probably the first one that comes to mind that really sparked my wanting to do more narrative pieces.
Wow. And where did you grow up? Did you grow up in LA?
Yeah, actually, I was born in SoCal, Orange County, because my mom thought the hospital was nice, but all my sisters were born in LA, and I grew up for a little while in Highland Park. But I'm a military brat, so I lived in Germany for 9 years.
Wow.
Bounced around, lived in England, was in New Mexico, and then Germany was my last stop. It was 4th through 12th grade.
Oh my gosh. And then where'd you go to college?
University of Arizona. So I'd never been there. The first time I went was orientation, and it was so hot that I told my sister, I was like, I cannot go to school here. And then she's like, I think it's a little late for that.
Oh my gosh. And then you came, what made you want to come to LA?
It's kind of funny. I worked at the student newspaper, the Daily Wildcat, on my campus. And one of the editors, the editor-in-chief, Christina Bui, she actually came here to the LA Times and wrote me a letter. And I still remember the letter. And it was like, Brittny, I think you would love it at the LA Times. She's like, I think the editors, the reporters, it's so collegial here. She's like, I just think you'd be a perfect fit. You should apply for this program. And she did this MetPro program too. And it's a diversity fellowship program. And she was right. I was like, let me apply. And I did. And every time like, especially when I'm out drinking, I'm like, well, and I'm with Christina, I'm always like, you're the reason I'm here. Thank you.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. And you've never left. So yeah, clearly a great fit for you.
Yeah, it is. My mom grew up reading the LA Times. So I think when I told my parents that I had gotten the job here, was the first time they were like, oh, this is legit what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Journalism is this like weird kind of lofty thing. I think similar to like entertainment industry. When you like, go home and tell your parents like, this is what I want to do. And they're like, oh, you don't want to be a doctor or an accountant or like.
Yes. The second I was like, said I was going to college, my parents were like, yeah, you should be a doctor or a lawyer. And I was like, I'm going to be a journalist. And they were like, I don't think that's a good idea. And then when I joined the student newspaper, they were like, if your grades drop, it's over. You gotta drop the student newspaper. And I was like, I can't do that.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, is there anything that has happened in your career that has been like a moment where you're like, oh, this is like so rewarding and this is exactly why I wanted to do this?
You know, honestly, it's kind of funny. I just had that this week where I had that experience. But like, it's nice because I think sometimes the emails that we get or the comments that we read, some of them are really negative. And it's hard to get that. And I think having a story run and having people reach out to me and tell me like, you know, thank you for telling my story and getting it right, I think means a lot to me because people put a lot of trust in us as reporters to tell the story, to get the story right, and to not misrepresent. And I think, even this week I got lunch with someone and it was really nice, honestly, because I was there to meet with him about a different story I wanted to do. And I wanted to interview him for it. And he was like, if it weren't for you, this specific thing wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have been part of this lawsuit. Like, no one would know this story. And he was like, and that means so much to me. And it was really nice. I feel like sometimes we can lose perspective and feel like, what impact are we having?
Yeah.
And so moments like that, I think, are really like reaffirming.
Oh, that's amazing. Wow. I mean, you're sort of like on the younger end of journalists, I feel like, but you've also been here 11 years. How has journalism evolved and shifted with like, you know, social media, this like new form of like now everyone's attention spans are shorter, and how are you adjusting and how has it shifted over time?
It's been so interesting seeing how things have shifted and how some things have come back, like aspects of things. Like even when I started in college, I interned at the Oakland Tribune, which isn't around anymore, which says a lot, I guess, about the state of newspapers right now. But when I was interning there, we were using what was called Tout. And it was like little video snippets that we would do. And it was really funny too, because when I started there, they were like, just FYI, the number one crime here is like people will snatch your phone out of your hand. And then they were like, also, we need you to take videos when you're out in the field. And I was like, okay, what? Okay. And back then it was like touting and I think Vine. And it was all these things that I was like, and then it kind of fell off. And then now we're back to like shooting videos again. And,
right.
And I feel like my job has evolved into more than even just using a notebook and a pen. I don't do that really anymore. Like it became a joke in a group chat I'm in where like I write directly into my phone, into my notes, so I can just email it to myself, or do voice memo because it'll transcribe it. And I'm like, okay, this is a lot more beneficial and easier for me, especially now that I'm having to juggle not just reporting and writing, but also video, posting on social media, like doing threads when I'm out in the field, or just capturing things that I can later use in a thread. But I feel like the biggest example I always use of how I feel like things have changed is that anytime I try to get my sisters to read a story, my little sister will be like, well, is there a video version? Like,
wow.
She's like, I'll watch the video. Just like, can you sum it up? And I'm like, okay. And so I feel like I still probably could do more, like maybe more like do a TikTok video. I don't know. I know I should do that, especially because I look at people like my little sister and I'm like, yeah, people's attention spans are definitely shorter. I think people want these kinds of videos that it's like digestible and they can kind of get a quick update. Even yesterday, one of my friends was like, can someone read me the version of your story? Like, is there like an audio version I can listen to? Like maybe while I'm just doing stuff around the house, I don't have to read it. And I was like, ugh, yeah. Well, I was like, yeah, sometimes we do that, but I don't have one for this story.
Right. Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting because, yeah, to your point, I do feel like there was a moment in time where audio was sort of taking over, but the video hadn't caught up to it. So like podcasting was never video podcasting in the beginning. And people went from like YouTube, which was very highly video focused, to the podcasting, which almost feels like a reversion and like you're stepping back, but podcasts were everywhere. And now it's like, and now we're back to video podcasts. And it's like all kind of back to video. But there was a moment where it was like, audio's good. We're good with just audio. You don't need the visuals. Don't worry about it. And now it's kind of coming back. But that's really interesting because, and I wonder where it will go down the line.
I know, me too. I'm always just like, are we just going to end up always cycling back and like we're just going to keep repeating the same circle? I mean, I feel like for me now, I'm just like, I should branch out and do TikTok videos. Like I know Carrie Blakinger, who used to be here, is so good at that.
Yeah.
Like her TikToks are so great and she like sums everything up. And to me, I'm like, if I can expand the reach of the stories, because I'm like, these stories mean a lot to me and I put a lot of time into them. And I'm like, I want people to read these and I want this to get attention. And so I just have to adapt, I guess. And even more.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see how it will evolve and shift over time. But you have a really big story that we're going to talk about today that I can't wait to discuss. After the break, Brittny and I will get into the strange story of how a reclusive man went missing, and in his place appeared a mysterious woman with a somewhat sketchy background. Fall is in full swing, and it's the perfect time to refresh your wardrobe with pieces that feel as good as they look. Luckily, Quince makes it easy to look polished, stay warm, and save big without compromising on quality. Quince has all the elevated essentials for fall. Think 100% Mongolian cashmere from $50, washable silk tops and skirts, and perfectly tailored denim, all at prices that feel too good to be true. By partnering directly with ethical top-tier factories and cutting out the middlemen, Quince delivers luxury quality pieces at half the price of similar brands. It's the kind of wardrobe upgrade that feels smart, stylish, and effortless. It's still really hot in LA, but as soon as it hits 70 degrees, you'll see me in the Australian merino wool-cropped mock-neck sweater. It's so soft, and the cropped length is perfect for me. Keep it classic and cozy this fall with long-lasting staples from Quince. Go to quince.com/LAcrimes for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/LAcrimes to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/LAcrimes. Welcome back to LA Crimes. I'm joined by Los Angeles Times reporter Brittny Mejia. Brittny, where do we even start with this story? Maybe let's just like set the scene of the crime.
Yeah, so this all started on a one-block street in Sherman Oaks. It's all these like multi-million-dollar homes. The neighbors, this is what's interesting, is I live in an apartment, and I couldn't really tell you much about most of my neighbors.
Same.
Yeah, so I feel like, but these neighbors are, I don't want to say nosy. I think that they're very in tune with what is happening on their street. And if something unusual is happening, they tend to pick up on it. So this is that kind of street.
Well, not to generalize, but we live in apartments, right?
Yeah.
If I owned a million-dollar, multi-million-dollar home, I would probably be at a level where I'm like, what's going on around here? It just feels like sort of the vibe.
Yes, very true. I'm like, if I owned a home for sure, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I definitely need to know what's happening on this street. And I think it all really started with the neighbors being like, there's something weird happening on our street. Kingswood Road is the street. And it all centered around this neighbor, Charles Wilding. And he had lived there with his mom for his entire life. This guy's born in like 1951. Lived there his whole life.
Wow.
Yes. And him and his mom were pretty reclusive. Like, she took care of him. I think she was more in tune with the neighbors and talked to them more. He was very shy, very withdrawn. I think she took a lot of care of him, even when he was an adult. And when she passed away, his mom, in 2017, he, I think, got even more reclusive, if that was even possible. But the neighbors all knew him. They were familiar with him. They were like, oh, that's Charles. Like, sometimes he walks to the grocery store in this big puffy jacket, even if it's summertime. Or if they try to talk to him, he'd be like, oh, they'd be like, he wasn't rude. He was just like, can you please leave me alone, kind of? Like, I can figure it out on my own. And no one ever painted it to me like, oh, that guy is so rude. It was more just like he liked his privacy and he wanted to be alone. But people started to clock his comings and goings. And then he stopped going anywhere and just kind of seemingly disappeared at one point.
Wow. So he stopped going anywhere and neighbors started to notice. How long was it before it became a little strange? Because I'd imagine if he's not leaving a lot, maybe after a week or two you'd go, oh, that's not suspicious. But then, oh, it's been a while. How long was that?
So everything started to be strange in fall 2020. So this was like right when it was like the pandemic. We all knew what that was like. Everyone was staying indoors. People weren't really going out. And at one point he had like let everyone know in the neighborhood, like, I have COVID, I'm just going to be in my house, like, kind of leave me alone. And this was all just like that fall. And so people, I think, were kind of like, oh, okay, maybe that's what's going on. And then this woman shows up, Caroline Herrling. She's a redhead woman, very bubbly, very vivacious. Like, all the neighbors I interviewed on that street were like, she was so charming. I mean, she comes to the house, she comes door to door, and she's like, hey guys, just so you know, I'm the trustee of the estate for Charles. We're gonna start doing work on the house, like, just letting you know who I am. Because people started asking questions, kind of like, where's Charles? Who are these people? And so she writes this letter and she's like, oh, Charles is at his summer house in Carpinteria. And everyone there is kind of like, that's weird, because they'd known him since he was a boy and they were like, he's never left the neighborhood. So they were already kind of suspicious. But here's this woman who has all these documents, is telling them, yeah, like, I'm the trustee. I know his mom through docent work at the Getty, which his mom did do that work. So I think a lot of people were like, oh, okay, maybe she's telling the truth. But at some point, LAPD gets a phone call, and it's December of 2020. And it's like right before Christmas. And people are like, someone reports that he's missing, like Charles is missing, and they have questions. And so the police show up.
And we don't know who it is. Who made this call?
No clue who made the call. I don't know if it was a neighbor. I don't know who called it in. It was interesting because when I went to the street, I had a few neighbors who were like, I called, but nothing was happening. And they were like, I just thought maybe – they were like, I don't know. They thought it was low priority maybe.
Right.
I don't know what changed that December that the LAPD showed up and they were like, hey, we're doing a welfare check. And Caroline Herrling's there, and she's like, meets them on the driveway, and she's like, oh, I'm the trustee, and here's these documents. And they search the house, and they don't find anything, although I later found out actually that Charles's body was in the garage, and he was dead. Like, right when LAPD showed up that December, he was already dead.
Oh, my gosh. Have you seen the movie Weapons?
No.
Okay, you have to. Not to spoil it. There is a character in the movie that is a very, like, clown-like character. She has red hair, and she sort of moves in to sort of take over this house and becomes the spokesperson for the house.
Wait, that's crazy.
And so I'm, like, feeling like this is so similar.
Okay, I have to watch that now.
You have to watch it.
Very similar.
It's such a good movie, and the plot line has nothing to do with this, but, I mean, kind of. These kids go missing from this classroom, and that's sort of the premise of the movie, and I won't spoil it for anyone else, but there's this woman who has red hair, and she's like this kind of like weird – she's less charming and more creepy, but like tries to be charming in like a creepy kind of way, but very much reminds me of this. And I'm wondering now if this was all inspired.
That's really – honestly, maybe – I will say in doing this story – it was crazy to me seeing the lengths to which criminals go. Like, even her, like, she was looking for homes on Google Images that had algae-filled pools because it was an indicator that the property was not being taken care of, and it was potentially an option for them to take over. And one guy labeled himself a quote-unquote urban explorer. And what he meant was he went to look in rich neighborhoods for homes that had fallen into disrepair because it was a home that they could then target and potentially take over.
Wow. Oh my gosh. So was this woman's like letters and all of the stuff that she put together enough for the neighbors to sort of brush it off in the beginning? Like how long? So in the fall is when he says like, oh, he stops kind of coming around. And it's not until December that this like welfare check happens. At what point do the neighbors really start to think it's weird, or are her letters holding up enough that they're like, oh, this woman's taking care of him?
Yeah, that's what's interesting. I think initially the neighbors were giving her the benefit of the doubt because they were like, here's this woman. I don't know. I think maybe some people, because if you're not a criminal, I think your mind doesn't immediately go to like, here's the lengths people will go to. And so I think people's thought initially was like, well, this is a weird situation, but she has all this documentation. The interesting part is one of the neighbors who live next door to Charles is a probate lawyer. And so she was doing all of these documents in probate court, and he was suspicious. Like, I ended up going to his law office and talking to him, and he printed out all these documents for me because he found her to be – he's like, something's wrong here. And he started pulling all the probate documents because he was like, this seems weird. I don't – and the more research he was doing, the more he told me he was questioning, like, this actually seems not legit. Like, it seems like she's lying. And so he started to suspect. And it was bad luck, I think, for her too, that neighbor was a probate lawyer and had that experience because he was demanding documents from her. Like, he started to say, you know, you're a trustee or you're whatever. Like, can you provide this documentation? So I think he was pressing a lot more because he had that knowledge and background.
Oh my gosh. So what kind of documents was she providing? And how is she getting access to like, I mean, I can't imagine. My mom, who's not that old, like couldn't use Photoshop to save her life. Like, how is this woman like forging these documents?
So what was interesting is when I first started reporting this story was learning that the Postal Service was involved. Like it's a Postal Service inspector. And I was like, why is the Postal Service involved? Isn't that mail? It is, and what was used was the mail. Like, so what had happened was, so this is how Caroline Herrling and co-conspirators tell the story, that they had at one point, one of them had broken into the house. Charles, like basically what they would do is they'd break into a house. They would say, hey, like call out to see if anyone was home. And in this case, this guy was like, oh yeah, Charles Wilding answered, so I got scared and I ran out of the house. Then he said, I broke in again. And when I broke in again, he was already dead. And that's the way they tell the story. I don't know that investigators believe that's true. But when they broke in, there was a ton of mail. So Charles Wilding never left home. You know, he was a recluse. As a result, a lot of stuff had piled up in the house. And a lot of it was like records and documents or letters. So through that, they actually ended up forging a will that said that Charles Wilding had been left like over $1 million or something. And they were able to do that because they read letters that this woman who had passed away had sent to Charles's mom. And so they're going through all these letters and they're like, what can we use to then get more money? Or like, what can we, like seeing how June Wilding, Charles's mom, would sign her name so they could forge her signature. So it was a lot of utilizing mail around the house. And even her saying, oh, I was a docent, or I worked with her when she was a docent at the Getty. The online obituary for June Wilding said she worked at the Getty and was a docent. So like, when you think about how much information is actually available online, like whether that's through obituaries, just like social media posts, there's a lot of our lives that's available out there that we don't realize that can then be targeted and used by scammers. And Caroline Herrling, I'm pretty positive, found that obituary and was like, oh, I worked with her at the Getty. And people were like, oh, she did work at the Getty. Like, that makes sense.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a lot of forging I think it was like forging a will, forging that she was a trustee of the estate, filing all these records with probate court in LA County. And that was the crazy part. It was just very…
So she's actually filing these documents.
Yes. I think I heard from a former friend of hers who was like, yeah, Caroline really thought of herself as a lawyer. and felt like she had all this experience. And so she was acting kind of that way. Like she was a lawyer and she was filing all these documents, which is pretty crazy. I feel like filing forged documents or going to that extreme, it was very much her being like very confident in her ability to pull it off.
100%. So according to them, Charles is dead already when they arrive. But I'm wondering, let's say he wasn't, the conversation you have to just move into someone's house. I mean, clearly there was something, he wasn't fully able to take care of himself for most of his life, and that's why his mom was still taking care of him. But at some point, he had to have been like, who is this woman and why is she moving into my house?
I think what's so interesting is when I work on stories, it's the hardest part is having an unanswered question that you think you're never going to be able to answer. And I feel like the investigators in this case feel the same, where it's like there will always be a question we will never have the answer to. And it's like, how did Charles Wilding die? Like, was it that he was in the house and they moved in and he was like, what's happening? And then, did he die of natural causes before they even came? And the reason why they're never going to know is because the body is never found. They have never found his body.
So he wasn't inside the house. He was gone.
So when LAPD showed up at the door just a little bit before Christmas, December 2020, they don't find anything. There's no indication. I was told by investigators that the body was in the garage and that Caroline got so spooked, she moved the body to the balcony of her like rooftop apartment. And it's like this fancy apartment. She moves the body and then does what the postal inspector was like. I think maybe she watched an episode of Breaking Bad and this sparked her thought that she should dissolve the body in acid. She like gets a plastic tub, puts the body in the tub, puts like acid. It's like lye, using a baseball bat to like stir whatever is in the tub. And instead the tub is it's dissolving. Like the body is not dissolving. And so they are like, and it's crazy because it's all in these court documents where, the prosecutor who worked the case, Andrew Brown, he's just laying it all out. He's just like, here's what you did. That didn't work. And when that didn't work, she's like, let me take a trip to San Francisco. She like so I don't know how graphic to be because it is pretty horrendous what happened. They're saying that she would hold this over co-conspirators because she'd be like, oh, you're not getting the money. You're not getting extra money because I'm the one who like dismembered the body and like crushed up Charles's teeth and his bones and then takes whatever is left rents a muscle car, drives to San Francisco, goes on a boat. And the prosecutor in the case is like, she basically turned it into a mini vacation. Gets a boat, goes out into San Francisco Bay, and dumps whatever is left of Charles into the ocean.
Wow. When we come back, Brittny and I will dive a little bit deeper into Caroline Herrling's criminal past and what police did to zone in on her. Welcome back to LA Crimes. I'm here with Los Angeles Times reporter Brittny Mejia. So, Brittny, I'm dying to know what really happened to Charles, but it seems like that is the big question here.
Yeah, it's interesting. So all this stuff happens. The welfare check happens. No bodies found. January 2021, things start to get weirder. Like a lot more people showing up, sketchy people, the neighbors are saying, like all hours of the night. Caroline Herrling's like throwing all of Charles's stuff into like giant dumpsters, basically trying to sell the house. Like the plan was to sell the house. And people keep thinking like this is super weird. And suddenly this LAPD detective, this homicide detective, Mark O'Donnell, he gets this phone call, and it's a woman, an anonymous tipster, I still don't know who it was, calls him and is like, Charles Wilding is dead. And they're like, these scammers have taken over his house and you should really look into it. It's this whole thing. So this detective is like, but worked a lot of cases and told me like this was probably the most bizarre. And he starts looking into it. He sees that there was a welfare check. He like pulls the body cam footage, reaches out. Then he reaches out to Caroline Herrling and he's like, hey, where's Charles Wilding? And she gives him a number to call and she's like, oh, call this number. It'll forward to his phone. There's no answer. So then the detective calls her again and goes, you have a day to produce like an actual number or an address for Charles, or this is going to spark like a deeper investigation. And suddenly, she calls him, has someone there. She says it's Charles Wilding. And she's like, here, you can talk to him. So the detective's talking to him and he's asking him, what's your social security number? Like, what's your date of birth? This guy does not know the answers to those questions. And the detective is like, yeah, something's not right here. And so he ends up pulling in the postal inspector, Lyndon Versosa. And the postal inspector is like a money laundering expert, has handled a lot of like kind of crazy cases. He gets kind of tapped, starts looking into it. And his big thing is like, follow the money. We have to follow the money. And he basically creates this like web. And Caroline Herrling is at the center of the web. And it's who has she sent money to? Who has she received money from? Where is it going? It's going in, it's going out. Like who basically trying to take down the whole criminal network or trying to understand what has happened with this woman. Like who is she?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was a lot of I feel like it was interesting seeing that welfare check that resulted in nothing and then expanding into this where this detective is like, no, this is a really weird case. And the neighbors started calling him almost daily, like being like, hey, here's another thing we saw. Or, hey, Caroline's doing this weird thing now. Or, hey, I think they're renting out the house like to people. And they're just, these neighbors in these multi-million-dollar homes are like, what the hell is happening on our street?
Wow. So how long did it take before an arrest is made? Because I feel like you obviously want to have enough before you make an arrest. But the longer you wait, the longer you're allowing this all to sort of continue. Like if they had done something when they first did the welfare check, then all the other things wouldn't have happened. So it's like, how long did they really wait before they're showing up with like an arrest warrant?
What's interesting is I just started the federal courts beat last year. And it's so interesting to me whenever I see search warrants that are executed because charges probably won't come for like 2 more years.
Wow.
Because the feds are doing, especially when the feds are involved, it's a lot of investigation in ways that it's like we have to pull all these things. We have to have basically their thought was like, okay, look, if we take this on the state level, what are we going to have? Desecration of a body maybe? But they were like, we can't ever really get her for what happened to Charles Wilding because we don't know and we will never know if they murdered him or not. And so in their mind, they're like, how can we do enough investigating and actually have her receive what in their mind was a fair punishment for someone's death?
Right.
And in their mind, they were like, okay, if we take this federal, we can do wire fraud charges. We can handle this in a way that she'll get more time. So I feel like for them, when I talked to them, they were like, it did take a long time for them because they were like, we had to really untangle her web and really understand what all she had done because it wasn't just Charles Wilding. Like, it wasn't like in that time frame that was the only con she was running. Like, she had other cons, and the investigators started to realize once they looked into it more, they were like, oh, this is bigger even than we thought. This is bigger than one person.
Wow. So she's doing all of this, and how close are these other cons she's running? Like, I mean, because she's at this house quite a bit. Are these other cons in Sherman Oaks? Are they in California? Like, how is she able to sort of manage all of these different projects?
Yeah, projects is a good word for it. Yeah, I think, the other one centered around a house in Encino, which is not that far from Sherman Oaks. So that, and honestly, a lot of what they did, it's kind of similar to what I was saying earlier. It's like they would have research on like people who died, who were rich, maybe didn't have any heirs. And they were like, okay, maybe we can take over that estate because who's going to challenge it? If they don't have any heirs and they're just like leaving, who were they leaving the money to? And so it was a lot of that research or finding places that were maybe embroiled in like legal troubles or had been kind of abandoned. And so that was their whole MO. And the other con that they were running had to do around a house in Encino that belonged to Robert Tascone. He had an issue with squatters who were living on the property. He was trying to, and because he moved to Texas. So he was managing that estate from afar. And there was a big problem with squatters who were in that house. And so he was just like, what do I do? You know, I want to sell this house because he needed the money. And all of a sudden, in like 2021, you know, Caroline Herrling is coming in and ends up working with someone, sells the house out from under him for like over $1 million. And, you know, they like had said, oh, he gave power of attorney. He turned over power of attorney for the house to this person. Again, more forged documents. They were like, he turned over power of attorney, blah, blah, blah. The sale went through. They got the money. So they take that house, sell it out from under him.
So what, he just gets a call like, hi, your house was sold. The house you own.
Yes. So he learned his house had been sold and he's like, what? I didn't sell the house. So how did that happen? And it's him going to this investment company. It was like a development company that bought it. And they were like, well, we have all the paperwork. I don't know what to tell you. Basically, you're out of luck. And he ended up filing a lawsuit trying to fight it because he's like, I never signed anything. And it was interesting because when the investigators were uncovering it, eventually when they did this like interrogation or interview of Caroline, she's like, oh yeah, all I did was drive Robert to sign, you know, to sign whatever, like to sign the form or to sell the house. Like I only got paid like $250 for helping like be the witness or whatever for the notary or whatever. And the detectives like, the investigators are like, okay, well, describe what he looks like. And she's like, he wore a mask and sunglasses and a hat. And I don't remember. And so they were like, yeah, no, she never saw the guy. Like none of that ever happened. He was in Texas. He never did any of that. And it was crazy because they're doing, as they're like unraveling all of this stuff, like, and this guy is battling over this house. Like, and all of this starts to come out for the investigators later. But this guy, Robert Tascone, already had mental health issues, was like already struggling. And that next year he ended up killing himself. Like, and his partner, his like common law wife was like, it was because in large part she feels because the house was sold out from under him.
I have so many questions. First of all, this is all happening. My thing is like she's using the same name. So if that's going on in Encino and this is now happening in Sherman Oaks, this isn't that far away from each other. Like you could drive in 10 minutes to get from Sherman Oaks to Encino, no traffic. But how is this not so evident to people who are like looking into her? Oh, this woman's just moved in to Charles's house. Her name is this. They start doing some digging. This must pop up at some point. I mean, if she's the executor on 15 people's estates, surely that raises some red flags. But legally, like I'm a homeowner. I'm like, every time there's this like sort of running joke on the show, I have a new fear unlocked with every episode. And now I'm like very afraid of this happening to me. But how is that legal possible? How does that happen?
That is the part that it was so interesting. I mean, in me doing this story, I was trying to understand, how does probate court work?
Because so this investment company still owns that man's house?
Yeah. So they have, it's like this development company, they still own it. As far as I know, there's no like, I don't know why. I remember talking about this with my editor and I was like, I don't understand how this is possible. Like, I still don't understand. I mean, even when I was trying to dig into probate court and I asked this probate lawyer, I was like, how did any of this get through? I don't get it. And he was like, well, some of it didn't, or some of it, basically that sometimes the process can take so long in probate court, or if people aren't contesting it, or if they're going in situations where they're like, there's no heir, and they're not running, in my mind, it didn't seem like they were running a full background check on this person to see like, oh, they're filing all these weird things.
Yeah. And probate court is very weird. So yeah, I've had to like, I have probate records from my dad and there's all this like weird stuff going on and I was 6. So like it all gets really weird. My grandmother ended up signing over like a ton of stuff, being like, oh, we don't want to deal with this, not realizing she was giving up a lot of stuff on my behalf.
Oof.
And then asking kind of later, because I didn't look at these probate records until 6 years ago, and calling her going, did you know that like your signature's right here? And she's like, I just was told by an attorney to sign this paperwork. Yeah. And it's like, oh, you had no idea what you were even signing. And you think that these people represent you kind of because they're calling you and telling you that it's okay to sign it. And really, they're not.
Yeah, this is what I was telling at the time. I was telling my editor at the time, and I was like, I want to like dig into probate court because I was like, this is crazy. I was like, I don't understand how this happens, how this goes. Like, all these red flags are not coming up. I mean, there were so many aspects of this that were so bizarre to me about the case because the welfare check that didn't pan out into anything. There was also someone had filed a report with like Adult Protective Services about Charles Wilding, and they said they told officers they ended up closing the case because they talked to Charles, which there's no way. He was already dead.
Right.
And so it was someone that Caroline had put on the phone or given them the number, and he pretended to be Charles. And so it was all these missed opportunities, I think, to catch this earlier that were very surprising to me. And also the probate aspect of it. I mean, I had this probate lawyer telling me, like, this stuff can drag on a really long time. And he was like, in some of the cases, they were asking for more things because they already were suspicious, I think. So he was like, I don't know if ultimately she would have been successful in this case. But it's just probate court can be so complicated. And I was telling my editor, I was like, I still don't understand how this happened, like how this got through.
With the Charles case specifically, do you think that Caroline just got lucky that this man was like so reclusive, or do you think she was targeting him specifically?
I think they did their research on him, and I think that because of how she already knew June Wilding's, like his mom's backstory, I feel like I will say this for them, and even when I talked to the investigators, they were like, she like did meth daily, like was just like a very intense meth user. And they were like, but she was very sophisticated for being such a like drug user because they were like, she would go out, she knew how to be dress professionally.
Functioning addict.
Yes, they were like, she knew exactly what to do and what to say to people and how to play the game basically. And they were like, that was the part that, I mean, they were just saying like, yeah, that's the part that was just so weird to them. They were like, how she pulled it off. And I think Caroline I don't know that I would say anything she did was by chance or luck. I think she, based on what I was reading in the court documents, like she had whole spreadsheets of like heirs and like, you know, backstories of people who like had passed away or homes that, you know, I mean, the whole thing about the algae-filled pools, like,
yeah.
That's the part that I think really freaked me out is I was like, I was telling the postal inspector, Lyndon, I was like, I can't even, that's crazy. I was like, and I kept saying that to him and he was like, well, he's like, you're not a criminal. You don't have like the mind of a criminal.
Right. And I mean, I can't imagine having all of my crimes tracked on a Google sheet, but I guess.
Yeah, it's so, I mean, but that's the thing where I'm just like, she was organized in this way where she knew what she was doing. She like knew it. So to me, I'm like, no, she did her research, I think. Like,
right. I mean, do you think like she's ever gonna go the insanity route of like, I just was so crazy? Or it's like, I mean, she's so calculated, it seems like that would be impossible to.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It does. I think based on the investigators and everything they pulled from her, it is so calculated that I'm like, I don't even know how she would make that argument because I was like, she'd clearly done her homework. And I had been hearing from people that like, oh, a partner she had dealt with being a trustee. And that's where she was getting kind of her information from about like how the trustee process worked. And she did her research. She did her homework. And that's the thing is that I think the investigators even told me like she could have been so accomplished, they thought, because they were like, she's really smart.
Right.
And they were like, but she chose to use that intelligence for crime.
Right. So what ends up happening to her? Where is Caroline Herrling now?
So Caroline Herrling ended up getting arrested. So it was interesting because she gets confronted. She's getting like confronted by this detective who's kind of like, he's not letting it go. And so she then starts to be like, oh, just talk to my, like the lawyer ends up talking to the detective and saying like, my client's not going to answer any more questions about Charles. And Lyndon and Mark just kept unraveling the whole thing, figuring out all the stuff, where the money went for the moment where they inevitably like confront her with everything. And, it's just like, they're just saying she's lying. And even the detective, O'Donnell was telling me, like, I could tell even in my first interaction with her how inauthentic she was. Like, he was like, there was just something about her that wasn't right. And, she's like maintaining, oh, I just, I drove Robert to, I don't remember what he looked like though. And it was all these things that they were like, yeah, none of this makes sense. And also they basically, by the time I think they had arrested her, they were like, we have this locked up. Like, we have everything. Like, we have all the records. We have all the proof. Like, how is she going to get her? Like, there's no way she can weasel out of this.
Yeah.
In their mind. And so she ends up arrested and everything like starts to fall apart. Like, they're going to her co-conspirators, people who pretended to be Charles, like the man who pretended to be him, and they're interviewing him. They're interviewing the guy who had initially broken into the house. He's trying to take a plea deal or get a plea deal by sharing information about what unfolded, telling them like Charles died of natural causes. And it was just, I think for me, so interesting being at the sentencing hearing last year for her, because she was charged the year before last. So yeah, I think it was 2024. But I went to her sentencing hearing and it was so interesting because she's at one table and the postal, like Lyndon, Mark, and Andrew Brown, the U.S. attorney, were all across the table from her. And it was all these men who had helped take her down. And they're just like, she's just like not really looking at them. And they had just done so much, I think, and done so much like investigating because they were like, there has to be justice for Charles. Like, there has to be something. Like, she has to pay for what she's done. And I think for a while, I don't know. I mean, based on what they were telling me, her whole thing was like deny, and also not really take accountability. And I think she's even appealing now what her sentence was.
So what was her sentence?
Yeah, so Caroline Herrling was sentenced by the judge to 20 years in federal prison. It seems like I think she's going to end up serving 10 years. But it was interesting even being in the sentencing because her lawyer was very much like, well, we don't know how Charles died or Charles was already dead. And also she didn't have anything to do with the suicide of that guy. That guy was already mentally unstable. And the judge just didn't buy any of it, and just slapped Caroline Herrling with this 20-year sentence.
I mean, even just serving 10 feels like, how old is she? She'll be out and still, have a little bit of life left to live.
Yeah, she will. I mean, that's the thing. To me, I'm like still curious and still following the case. And I'd actually reached out to her because I really wanted to talk to her because I still have so many questions.
Oh my gosh. If you talk to her, we have to have you back.
Okay.
Wow. And what about her co-conspirators? So are they also arrested? Like what? Some of them are trying to get these plea deals. Like what's happening with them?
Yeah. What's interesting is I think the investigators didn't realize at the time that the web was going to grow to be so large. And when they started kind of unraveling everything, they're going through text messages, communications, and her basically being like, oh, I'm getting the bigger cut because I did, basically saying like, I'm getting the bigger cut because I did this, whatever, to get rid of the body. And like arguing with co-conspirators over that. And so they have also like, it was when I went to visit the postal inspector, he literally has a calendar, and in the calendar it shows like, so this person's sentencing or this, and so it's him being like, seeing it through to the end and being like, okay, here's another person who's got charged, or here's another person who's going to get sentenced. And one of them, it was the urban explorer guy who I think they were dating at the time. And then an ex-boyfriend of hers who's the one who was like, he had been a trustee of an estate, so he was helping her with that. So there was like all these little things that they were kind of pulling apart and unraveling. And there was another guy who had helped sell the house out from under Robert Tascone. They got him at the end. It was like more toward the end of last year. So yeah, it was it's still continuing. I mean, I talked to the inspector still, and I'm just like, hey, what's going on? And I talked to the U.S. attorney, and the assistant U.S. attorney, and they'll be like, oh, here's another person we're kind of digging into, or there's more coming. Like,
does she have to pay anything back? Like this man who Robert, does she have to give him the money that she made off of the sale of this house?
Yeah. So there is restitution. I mean, I just don't know how much she's even going to be able to pay back because of everything she did. Because even the money she got, it was like 1.4 million, I want to say, or it was more than $1 million she got for that house, that Encino house. And a lot of it went to her being able to purchase her own home in the West Hills. And so I think a lot of it was after was investigators seizing like her assets or seizing whatever she had. But the problem was a lot of the money was going out toward other co-conspirators. Like she's like paying people out. And so I just don't know how she's even going to be able to pay any restitution. And Charles Wilding's family ended up being able to sell that house in Sherman Oaks. Like it hadn't gone through to the point where she could do what she had done with the Encino house.
Wow. I mean, but close call.
Yeah, no, definitely a close call. And also, I think she did end up selling a lot of stuff that was in Charles's house. Like dumping stuff, selling stuff, I think. Like, I think even when they searched one property she had where she had stopped paying rent, so she got locked out. And then her home, they searched both. And they found like, practice signatures for June Wilding and like some of Charles's stuff that was in the house, like mail that belonged to the family. Yeah.
This is like the craziest story.
It is. It honestly, I was reading it again today before I came, and I was like, this story, I was like, I always forget how insane it is until I start to think about it again. And I remember talking to the investigators, and it was really funny because I kept being like, this case is crazy. And they're like, oh, no, yeah, we know. And I was just like, every time they tell me something new, I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, this is blowing my mind. This is crazy. How?
It's so scary. Oh my gosh. Well, and here we are again, another episode, and I'm terrified. Brittny, thank you so much for being here. This was incredible.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. And that's it for LA Crimes. If you like the show, subscribe on Apple Podcasts or by going to latimes.com/podcast bonus. That's latimes.com/podcast bonus. You'll gain access to this week's bonus episode where Brittny and I will be talking about the recently dissolved white supremacist group and the crimes they had planned before their capture.